Good evening, good evening, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We're looking forward to an exciting evening. I now hand you over to the capable hands of our moderator for this evening. That is Professor Avelston Bailey. Have a wonderful evening. To you, Prof. Bailey.
Thank you. Good evening, colleagues and friends. Welcome to the Agpj Annual Ethics Seminar. I am Dr. Avelston Bailey. Let me thank the Agpj and Medimpex for sponsoring this seminar. This evening, we will be taken on an interesting ethical journey to unravel a number of ethical and moral dilemmas which we as physicians have to grapple with. What's the difference between morality and ethics? Are they interchangeable? For many of us, ethics are external standards that are provided by institutions, groups, or culture to which an individual belongs. But morals are also influenced by culture and society, but they are personal principles created and upheld by individuals themselves. How can the different ethical theories apply to the practice of medicine? When is deontology, utilitarianism, rights ethics, and virtue ethics applicable? Now, colleagues, I'm particularly intrigued with rights ethics. Many moral controversies today are couched in the language of rights. Indeed, we seem to have witnessed an explosion of appeals to rights: gay rights, prisoners' rights, animal rights, smokers' rights, fetal rights, employee rights, etc. So, the question that we are poised to have answered for us this evening is, should morality and ethics be legislated? We stand by to listen attentively to our guest speaker as he guides us through this ethical maze. We also look forward to the lecture and updates in contraceptive technology. Let me therefore, at this point in time, invite the AGPJ President to bring you greetings. Over to you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Professor Bailey, moderator. Good evening, colleagues. Moderator, Professor Bailey, presenters, Dr. Aarons and Dr. Fredericks, our valued sponsors, Medimpex Pharmaceuticals, and members of the Secretariat and technical staff. I'm Dr. Gordon, President of the Association of General Practitioners of Jamaica. It is my pleasure to welcome you to another of our annual ethical webinar, proudly sponsored by Medimpex Pharmaceuticals in collaboration with the Association of General Practitioners. As an association, we always strive to put on educational meetings for the benefit of our membership. Along with this even ethical topic, there's an equally interesting presentation on contraceptives. The Association and Medimpex have joined forces once more to bring this webinar on ethical situations that we consider to be of broad interest, importance and interest to the membership. In ethical situation, as is customary, there is often no one correct answers to most ethical situations and questions. In this evening webinar, we may not be able to give answers to thorny ethical, legal, or moral questions. What we will strive to do is to examine the principles underlying the decision-making processes. We trust you, the audience, will enjoy and participate fully in this evening's ethical and scientific presentation. We trust the principles discussed and the information imparted will assist us in our practices to make better decisions that are legally and morally grounded and rooted in proper scientific knowledge. Thank you very much, and we'll hand you over back to the moderator, and we hope you enjoy this evening meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. And now we'd like to invite Mr. Warren Morrison, Medical Rep Supervisor, to share thoughts with us. Over to you, Mr. Morrison.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Gordon. Thank you, Professor Bailey. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Medimpex is delighted once again to partner with the AGPJ in hosting this annual ethics webinar. This is our third year collaborating, and we want to give special thanks to Dr. Gordon and his team, including Mrs. Lynn Thompson Hyatt for her hard work, as well as Mr. Heron from Oldgate Solutions. Special welcome to all of you who have joined us so far, especially those who have joined us from the Caribbean and further afield. Thanks for your tremendous support over the past years. Last year we had a record attendance, and this year it seems as if we're going to do the same. Over 1,000 persons have already registered and many have logged in. This year, the decision was taken to give this webinar a women's health focus, of course, against the background of all the debates that are presently taking place. Medimpex, as you know, we market and distribute some products that cater for women's health. We can think of products such as Norcolot, or OCP such as Lindinet, Novinet, Mistral, or ECPs, Postinor, Postinor 2 single dose, and other products such as Cleon-D and Microsys. We appreciate partnering with you, and we encourage you to continue to specify our brands as we continue to offer to you first-class products for healthy living. I want to use this opportunity to introduce to you our new managing director. His name is Dr. Philip Nedish. He is a native of Serbia. For those of you who are tennis fans, that's where Novak Djokovic is from, Southeast Europe. Now, Philip is a medical doctor who has specializations in clinical pharmacology and business. He has been working in the pharmaceutical industry for about 10 years, joining the representative office in Serbia, Gideon Richter, Serbia. He has been our managing director just for 2 months now, but he is slowly assimilating himself into the Jamaican culture. So we want to welcome you, Philip, to Jamaica and to Medimpex. I'd like to use this opportunity too to acknowledge our hard and dedicated team of medical representatives who I have the pleasure of supervising. Just would like to remind you of the team. This is Paul Dennis and Sasha Dixon. They work parts of Kingston, Clarendon, and the Eastern parishes. Paul is our senior medical representative. Sasha is presently on maternity leave, but she'll be soon seeing her again. We also have Lisa Hubbard and Christopher Fuller, two reps who have been working Kingston and parts of Kingston and St. Andrew, as well as the central parishes of Clarendon and Manchester. Both have been with Medimpex for many, many years. We also have Melanie Miller. She is our representative in the northern and western parishes. Presently, she's working alone. Hopefully, we can get a team member for her soon. And also, we have Paulette Bedward and Shan Megu, who particularly market the MK line and some other Medimpex products. Paulette predominantly works the northern parishes, and Shan predominantly works the southern parishes. So once again, I'd like to extend a warm welcome to all who have joined so far. And we anticipate the debates and the topics that will be presented by Dr. Aarons and Dr. Frederick. So please enjoy the time with us. And we hand back over to our moderator, Professor Bailey.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Morrison. And now, ladies and gentlemen, it's time for the main event. Our first presenter is my friend and colleague, Dr. Derrick Aarons, who obtained his MBBS from the Faculty of Medical Sciences, UWI, and his master's in bioethics and palliative care from McGill Center for Medicine, Ethics and Law, and his PhD in bioethics and experimental medicine from McGill University. He is consultant bioethicist and family physician who is currently serving as member and chief coordinator for the International Bioethics Committee of UNESCO. He is also the ethics chair for the Caribbean Public Health Agency, CARPHA, serving the 24 member states across the Caribbean. Derrick is also serving as adjunct faculty in the Department of Bioethics, Clarkson University, USA, and is consultant for the Center for Global Bioethics, St. George's University in Grenada. He has served as a member of the International Advisory Board for Bioethics of the Pan American Health Organization, as deputy chairman for the National Bioethics Committee of Jamaica, and is a bioethicist for the Ethics Committee at the Faculty of Medical Sciences, MONA. He is chair for the advisory panel on the ethics and medical legal affairs in the Ministry of Health, Jamaica, and was the convener and founding president of the Bioethics Society of the English-speaking Caribbean. Now, in my opening remarks, I pointed out to you that Derrick has a difficult task in front of him. Should morality and ethics be legislated? As humans, Do we have the inherent right to do what we think is in our best interest without the interference of the state? Hence, the ever recurring question: the right to life, the right to choice, the right to the pursuit of pleasures which add value to our life if such pursuits do not impact negatively on others. So this evening, Derrick will address these issues, and we anticipate that after his presentation, it will be much clearer in our minds about whether morality and ethics should be legislated. Ladies and gentlemen, let us welcome Dr. Arians to the podium to make his presentation.
Good evening, colleagues and viewers everywhere, and welcome to my treatise on a number of issues this evening. On this first topic, now, many persons think that there are only two sides to the issue of abortion. We should note, however, that due to cultural penetration from mostly through mass media from the USA, our local population will often hear the terms currently being used in North America, that you're either pro-life or pro-choice. However, the matter is far more complex than these two terms suggest, and they're sometimes adversarial positions. And so what I want persons to do is to realize that persons will come to different opinions and positions depending on the particular prism they use when they view these issues. Some persons use a religious prism. Some use a human rights prism. Some use a secular prism, while some others use a multidimensional contextual prism. All of these prisms are relevant in a society such as ours, which is a pluralistic society in which many cultures, religions, values, and beliefs exist. Sure, we have a dominant religion, Christianity, but the ethical principle of justice requires that individuals and minority groups be protected from the demands of any dominant group, since they're all equal participants and inhabitants in society, equally paying taxes and generally contributing positively to the welfare of the society as a whole. So let's look at the various considerations necessary when we examine the issue of abortion from a physiological standpoint, a religious standpoint, a human rights standpoint, and a justice standpoint. Now, first, let's get some basic concepts clear. We need to have a clear idea about human life and human being. The two are not synonymous. Human life is a biological phenomenon which begins when a human egg is fertilized by a human sperm and begins to develop into a living organism. A human being has human form, the physical appearance of humans. After fertilization, the fertilized egg begins to develop into an embryo, which then develops into a fetus. That fetus resembles a mature human form at about 9 weeks of gestation. So, a human being is a physical continuum along the spectrum that commences with human life. From a religious standpoint, it has been argued that a human person has a soul, but there is no common agreement regarding when the multiplying cells of human life are at a sufficient stage of differentiation and development for the soul to enter. Some believe it is when a body exists and the organs are formed within the body. Some believe it is when brain activity becomes organized, while some believe the soul enters the body at birth. There is, however, common agreement that the soul departs the body at death. Let's now look at some secular issues. A plurality of beliefs also exist regarding how much credence and consideration should be given to the social context of abortion. Yes, in life, everything is contextual. Context matters, even in law. And as we say in ethics, particularity matters. The particulars of a case may cause you to make a different determination or dictate or provide a different outcome. Such are the multifaceted areas and multifaceted issues surrounding abortion. So, several considerations are important when discussing the issue of abortion. To delve into these facets, we should remind ourselves of some embryology. At the start, fertilization of the human egg by a human sperm occurs, and implantation in the mother's womb occurs. When the fertilized egg, called the blastocyst, attaches to the lining of the uterus, then this marks the beginning of a pregnancy. In other words, successful implantation equals the start of pregnancy. At this stage, some may argue, if the fertilized egg is prevented by whatever means from implanting in the womb, is such a process abortion? By definition, an abortion is a procedure carried out to end a pregnancy. But pregnancy commences when the fertilized egg is implanted in the womb. So, any act that prevents implantation cannot be deemed as abortion, since pregnancy would not yet have occurred. Hence, such arguments are fallacious. Next, attached to the lining of the womb, the blastocyst, which is the fertilized egg, grows into an embryo. This term embryo is used for the progressive development of the cells, dividing and differentiating from weeks 2 to week 8, after which the term fetus is used. From week 8 onwards, the fetus progressively develops, with almost all organs being formed by week 10 to 12. However, the brain and the spinal cord continue to develop right throughout the pregnancy. Now, we do not often hear arguments that are posed for abortion, which by definition is the ending of a pregnancy. That is, the action taken after implantation has occurred. We don't normally hear arguments for it because abortion and the decision surrounding the issue is a very personal matter, which occurs when within a person's private sphere. There is no organized group that argues for it. Instead, it is a decision left up to the individual and their own particular circumstances. However, what we often hear are arguments against abortion. These arguments have traditionally rested on 3 premises. 1, that an embryo possesses humanity from the moment of conception. That is fertilization of the human egg by a human sperm. 2, that every human being has a right to life. And 3, therefore, once conceived, the embryo has a right to life. However, there are 2 important considerations here. on which there are divergent views. As was just stated, some persons arguing against abortion equate the embryo to a human being. However, while some admit that the embryo is in fact human life, it is not yet at the stage of development to be considered a human being. So the second premise of this type of argumentation is challenged, since while every human being has a right to life, the developing embryo is not yet a human being. And so the third premise by this view is fallacious. By this view, once conceived, an embryo would not have a right to life until it develops into a human being. 2, another perspective is reasoned from the ethical principle of justice. Here, the matter revolves around the right to life and whether this right is absolute or is tempered or constrained in any way. By this view, the fundamental point is that the embryo and subsequently developing fetus does not have any absolute right to life, but rather has the right not to be killed unjustly. By this view, it could be killed in order to save the life of the woman, since it cannot survive biologically without the woman and her womb. Consequently, by this view, abortion is neither permissible nor always impermissible. The circumstances matter. The reason for having the abortion is a morally relevant consideration because it bears upon the issue of whether the abortion is justifiable. So, for example, in the case of rape, it may be argued that the abortion of a fetus conceived through the process of rape is not immoral because the fetus has no valid claim to use the body of the woman for its development. Generally, concession is also made in some quarters and in some jurisdictions that a woman may exercise her right to terminate a pregnancy in circumstances where her life is in danger. And therefore, persons in authority and those who are obligated to secure people's rights and health should accede to a woman's request for an abortion. On the other hand, where a woman indulges in intercourse, knowing of the chance that it could result in pregnancy, but does nothing to prevent it, and then she becomes pregnant, one could argue that the woman is at least partly responsible for the presence of the embryo and subsequent fetus inside her. In this case, the fetus may have a right not to be terminated under these circumstances, since to do so would be unjust. So we may see that in using these lines of argumentation, the issue would seem to turn on the voluntariness of the occasion and whether women dependent on their boyfriends, husbands, or partners may be regarded as being truly autonomous or self-determining. Certainly, some persons argue, nobody should be morally required to make large sacrifices of health, of work and other duties, of commitments, of other interests and concerns for a 9-month period unless they fully wish to do so. So, when discussions about abortions occur within this wider context within a society, there may be a number of compelling reasons that may influence the decision to end a pregnancy in a just manner, including situations of violence, illness, poverty, economic dependence, addiction to harmful substances, discrimination, as well as responsibility to others. Further, in this contextual approach, remember we say that context matters, there may be a range of cultural and political factors which militate against women being in control of their sexuality. And so we should not automatically assume that they had voluntarily assumed the risk that is associated with sexual intercourse. Sexual coercion, which is regarded by some persons as prevalent rape, or the price of a continued goodwill in an emotionally or physically abusive and violent relationship, as well as the acceptance of dominance or as a means of survival, or to create peace, popularity, or the fear of emotional rejection or compliance, or having an extra sensitivity to the demands of others, may all be factors along the path leading to a decision to end or not to end a pregnancy. We should also note that in the contextual framework, the woman is placed at the center of the decision-making process, in which she has to balance the interests of all the beings, including possibly other children, spouse, and family members, as well as the embryo or fetus affected by her decision. We should also note that the fetus has a unique physical status within the woman and is totally dependent on her. Consequently, while the fetus figures highly in this contextual framework, any perceived right it may have is relational to the woman and the other obligations that she also has. And so such rights cannot be absolute. From this contextual prism, therefore, the decision whether or not to have an abortion should be left to the individual's moral conscience rather than being a matter for legislation by a government or a state. Another prism is that of moral status. Using this prism, persons contend that, sure, the embryo is alive, but it ought not to be accorded the full and equal moral status of a person. When viewed with the prism of moral status, the growing embryo increases in moral status. And when it becomes a fetus, its moral status increases more. As the fetus grows and matures, it continues to increase in moral status until at delivery, that is birth, it finally achieves the full moral status of a human being. As stated previously, as a product of two human beings, it is regarded as human life from the moment of conception, but it is not yet a human being until its organs are developed, its brain develops for thought processing, and then it is delivered into the world as a human being. So there is a certain amount of moral status at conception, and this moral status grows as the body organs form and the fetus assumes human characteristics. And with each passing month, its moral status grows until it reaches viability, the ability to live as a human being outside of the womb of the woman. It just reaches, at that point, the full moral status at delivery. Let's now look through another prism, that of human rights. The issue of autonomy is very important in all Western societies. And so we should respect that all persons are entitled to make decisions that guide their own lives. All human beings have human dignity and are worthy of respect. Their autonomous decisions about their bodies and their lives should always be respected. However, we all must exercise caution and invoke reasoning when we propose measures that carry legal consequences for everyone. We should always aim, always attempt to foresee the consequences for everyone when we propose actions that will affect them, particularly for vulnerable persons and vulnerable groups. Pregnant women are classified worldwide as a vulnerable group. Further, we should always be aware that the field of public policy is very distinct from the matter of private and personal conscience. We should note that many women in our Jamaican society are not totally autonomous in making choices and determining the course of their lives. And many may be totally dependent on the men in their lives. The issue thus becomes, how voluntary are their decisions and the subsequent outcome? On the matter of abortion, if their decisions are not completely voluntary, should public policy be such that they be required, against their will, to make great sacrifices of health, of risk to health, sacrifice their own obligations, other commitments, and other personal interests for the 9 months of pregnancy and the following 18 years of child rearing? Social policy, legislation, and public morality should recognize that abortion has been and will always occur in societies all around the world for many reasons. The reality that ganja possession and smoking was causing large portions of the Jamaican society to develop criminal records, which then severely affected their lives subsequently, contributed to the decriminalization of ganja in Jamaica. So since pregnancy termination will always occur, whether it is made legal or illegal, as was the aim of the decriminalization of ganja in Jamaica, the aim of our policy on abortion should be to see that if and when abortion occurs, there is as little damaging of women as possible. This underscores the ethical principle of non-maleficence. So, in summary, many prisms may be used to examine the multifaceted issue of abortion. Abortion occurs within the social context of society. And so the issue of context should never be left out of any discussion of the subject. As the matter involves the body of the woman, she should be at the center of decision-making. And finally, considerations of moral status, autonomy, and public policy that seeks to minimize harm are all important to these discussions. I thank you for your kind attention and look forward to Professor Bailey guiding us over the next few minutes. Over to you, Al.
Thank you, Derrick. I suspect that would you like us to ask questions now with respect to abortion, or do you want to move on to the next topic?
Yes, I wish us to spend a few minutes if there are any questions before I move on to the next topic. Sure.
All right. Let me congratulate you, Derrick, for an excellent presentation, which looked at the contextual issues we need to consider when it comes to abortion. Very impressed with your concept of the prisms, the religious prism, secular prism, moral status, and human rights. Of course, you are aware that there are some individuals listening this evening who are very strong religious prisms and will not change irrespective of the arguments presented. But you appeal to them to use their thought processes in order to decide the way forward. So, there's a question here that I've seen, which says, isn't a cell a living being? I thought it was quite interesting because it does have the characteristics of life in it. So the person is asking you, would you say that a cell is a living being?
A cell is not a living being. But if the cell becomes fertilized and begins to multiply, we're assuming, of course, that it's gametes we're talking about, sperms and eggs. If the egg becomes fertilized and begins then to divide, that is when a living organism is on the way. But as I pointed out, because I've explained many views, that many persons do not give equal moral status to cells that are multiplying to develop human form as being equal to a child that has just been delivered. That those are the concepts that I want persons to have clear in their minds. Whatever their particular views, and we live in a pluralistic society, many views, many values, many beliefs exist, and we have to respect others that are of different views. And so I in my presentation, I tried to show the different perspectives that people use to view this matter of abortion. And we all have to respect the views of others.
Thank you, Derrick. Another question. Should a woman be at the center of decision making if she has mental illness or is mentally deficient? Can she make a decision with respect to whether a pregnancy is terminated or not?
That is a very important question. What it speaks to are two very important areas in clinical ethics, which speaks to the ability to make, the capacity to make decisions which are health related, and then the issue of mental competence, which falls within the ambit of the psychiatrist. And so context matters. And we can't make a broad-based determination in answering that question without looking at the particularity of the specific case. Each individual, even persons who are mentally ill, are still capable of making decisions in regards to their health care. It is only when they're declared mentally incompetent by the psychiatrist, then proxy decision makers come in, be it next of kin or in healthcare, maybe the attending doctor or so on. But particularity matters. The context does matter. We can't make a broad sweeping statement.
A question. If abortion is done on an underage child, which of the prisms would be included?
The contextual prism, for the simple point that the child is on the age. It's not a legal mature age. It means that the child has been raped. The child does not have the ability to consent. And so it's a multi-context that has to be, the law comes in, it's rape, but also the circumstances of parenting, how that child come to be in that position, and so on. So all the context comes in those situations.
An interesting question there. This question said, as a doctor, would it be contravening our medical ethics if he or she tries to convince a patient not to have an abortion?
And there are going to be a divergence of opinion on this. I'm just looking at ethically, the ethical principles that we come to bear when we think of professional ethics. In professional ethics, the health professional should not seek to impose his or her own personal beliefs and values on the patient, be it their religious values, their secular values. They are there to attend to the patient and their bodies, their healthcare. And so it is what the patient wishes that should carry forward. Only if the attending physician figures that a law is being broken, that it could be that this person is going to commit suicide, or they say they're going to kill someone else, or so on, then those considerations come in. But in terms of the doctor saying, I don't think you should, it is my view that I'm imposing on you. If you're attempting to talk the person out of abortion, the doctor should be aware, and I know some doctors do it, but the doctor should be aware they are in fact imposing their own views, values and views on the patient. And so we have got to get the concepts clear. The patient comes into the doctor for healthcare advice. What the doctor says is critical. However, the doctor should not impose his or her own personal views, religious or otherwise, on the patient, but guide the patient in terms of their healthcare decision-making and ask them, if necessary, to seek their advice of other persons that they may trust. It could be their siblings, their pastor, their attorney, but you encourage them to contemplate if you feel it is the best way forward, but you should not impose your own personal views on the patient, because that is where paternalism comes in. And as you know, we shifted out of paternalism from the 1960s and 70s, not what the doctors believe, but really what patients are going to decide that is best for their bodies.
Thank you, Derrick. Another interesting question. Do men or fathers have any right in the decision-making process with respect to an abortion?
That is to be determined by the woman. Remember, we said that the woman is at the center of the decision-making process. So if she knows, for instance, and let's use one example, that she's in an abusive relationship, she would not want that father to be the sole determinant of the decision. She will decide, and we should seek to protect her right to make decisions about her bodies, not what a man says should happen to her body. Even if it's her husband, it is still her body. And so you can have mutual discussions. Certainly, the man, the spouse, the husband, whatever, would maybe a part of it, or if she decides, should be a part of the discussion. But in the end, it should be her decision, because it is her body. She's feeling that pain. She is going through 18 years of child rearing subsequently. Sometimes she may be abandoned subsequently by the man who had persuaded her in one direction or another. And the persuasion may be in either direction, to have an abortion or to keep the child. But the fact is that she is the one, as a mother, who will have to carry that 9 months and carry those 18 months of child rearing. She should be the main determinant of what the process ought to involve.
Interesting there, because that actually is a question that arises many times in the whole debate as to whether the father or husband has given permission for the procedure to take place. You are raising the student upon honestness of controversy here, because there are many of the 791 participants here, I'm sure they're saying, okay then, I mean, the father has no role to play in all of this. I mean, is that what you're saying? I mean, that the father, at the end of the day, it is the woman who makes the decision. The final decision is the woman's decision, even if the man objects strongly to it.
Exactly.
Okay.
Because it's not the father's body, you know, it's a woman's body. And so that is where the issue should finally be determined, what the mother wants for her body. Others will contribute They'd participate, they'd be a part of the discussion, but the final decision should be made by her and not by others that are extraneous to the process. In the interest of not cutting so much into Dr. Frederick's time, I'm going to see if...
No, actually, Derrick, your presentation goes up to 8 o'clock here. So
yeah, but 2 topics that I have to present.
I understand, but I want to ask you one last question, because I'm not sure if you addressed this, but one of the issues that a lot of healthcare providers have had to try and address is, when is it ethically inappropriate to perform an abortion? Is there a cutoff point that you would recommend? You did mention the different stages of fetal development. Is it unethical to perform an abortion, say, after all organogenesis have taken place, or pre-organogenesis? And part of the argument that is oftentimes put forward is that if the lady waited until organogenesis has been completed, then she really didn't actually really want the abortion. Of course, contextually, that might not have been the case. But from an ethical point of view, is there a cutoff point?
No.
Ouch.
And I'll tell you why.
Go ahead.
Context matters. Ethics is about context. And so there may be, for instance, and I'm just using a far-out example, that woman may not have been fully competent, aware of her pregnancy. And we have heard examples of this. Persons who didn't realize they were pregnant until, say, 6-7 months, when things begin to show, and they go to the doctor and they're checked out. And then they retrace that, hey, they were raped, on such and such an occasion. Now, in such a case, the fetus would not have any just right to occupy the womb of its mother, because it went there by illegal means. And so you can't have a hard fast and say it would be unethical to do that, because the argument would be, and this is why I use different prism, the moral status of that fetus would not yet be at the stage of a human being at birth. It has far advanced beyond embryo, but it still has reached full moral status for delivery, for viability. And so, given that that fetus is found to be occupying the womb unjustly, it went there illegally, rape, then ethically, it will be permissible in such a circumstance. And that's why I say context really matters. Context matters.
Okay, thank you very much, Derrick. You have been very frank and pointed in your responses to the questions. We have 15 minutes left for your presentation, so I think you'd like now to move into the next presentation. Thank you very much for your very excellent responses. Go ahead now, Derrick.
Thank you, Professor Bailey. My second topic, which has been well advertised, speaks to legal prohibition. And so when we ask our lawmakers to forbid something by law, we may be making such a request because we think that doing so is for the public good. We can think of many examples of this: predial larceny, scamming, and so on. However, when we ask them to write laws to address values and beliefs that some of us share, but some of us do not, are we asking them to legislate morality? First, I want to have a clear idea about values and beliefs, personal morality, and public morality. As we grew up as children, our parents instilled their values into our upbringing. As teenagers growing up, we may also adopt some of the values we perceive within our various communities and society. As adults, these may become our personal values, what we believe is right and wrong. Be aware that it is almost impossible for any two persons to have identical values on everything, simply because of the variable influence that the environment plays in the process, even among identical twins. So our personal morality is specific to us. As I often say in many of my lectures in ethics, once we move out of our personal space and our personal morality and begin to interact with others, then the matter of ethics kicks in. Simply put, ethics sets standards on how we should interact with each other. So for us, as health professionals, we have professional ethics, which dictates how we should interact with our patients. We have clinical ethics, which sets the standards of decision-making in healthcare matters within the clinical setting. We have research ethics, which sets the standards of how human participants in research should be treated. And we have public health ethics, which sets the ethical principles and standards involved when catering to the health of large groups of people. For us this evening, much of our discussion falls under the realm of public morality. Public morality refers to the moral and ethical standards that are enforced within our society and applied to public life and to our conduct in public places. The matter most often involves the regulation of sexual matters, which include prostitution and homosexuality, but it may also address issues such as nudity, pornography, whether or not living together before marriage is acceptable, as well as the protection of children. The principle, this particular principle, holds that a legitimate function of the law is to enforce morality by making or turning the immoral into the illegal. The rationale that some people provide for this is that the restrictions placed on certain specific actions by law are justified on the presumed fact that the actions are immoral and so ought not to be performed. We should note that, to a considerable extent, law expresses the values of a society and that society's judgment about what is morally right. So in some societies, women should always cover their hair or their faces or be fully clothed from head to foot, or that girls should not receive the same education in school as boys. In almost all societies, homicide and theft are recognized as crimes, and those who commit them are guilty of legal as well as moral wrongdoing. Society thus attempts to prevent such crimes and to punish offenders. However, the degree to which the law should embody moral judgments is a hard question. This is even more problematic in a pluralistic society where many different values and beliefs exist. In such societies, there may be sharp differences of opinion about the moral legitimacy of some actions. Up until recently, in some societies, birth control literature could not be freely distributed. Contraceptives could not be legally prescribed, and materials considered obscene by some could not be purchased. Further, the conditions of divorce were generally very stringent and punitive. We are aware that even now, not only in Jamaica and the Caribbean, but many countries in Africa and elsewhere still outlaw homosexual acts and solicitation. And prostitution is, by and large, also illegal. The foundation for such laws is the belief by many that the practices prescribed are morally wrong. So, for example, we have been witnessing much heated debate in the USA over the issue of abortion. And this reflects a moral conflict between those who favor strong legal moralization or legal moralism and those who oppose it. Many who consider abortion to be morally wrong wish to see laws that make it illegal. However, others, even though they may not be in support of the matter of abortion, believe it is a private matter and that to attempt to regulate it by law is an unwarranted intrusion into the people's personal private sphere by state power. Where human and other resources are very limited, many have questioned whether the police, public prosecutors, and judges' time, as well as the time of their supporting personnel and resources, should be preoccupied or taken up with an overload in our attempts to regulate public morality. Further, just how far should government-sanctioned views on morality intrude into the private lives of its citizens? Government legislators and officials write and enforce the laws of society. And so government and those who comprise it are invoking their own set of values and morals, which may then be brought to bear in their deliberation and decision-making and judgment about the action and behavior of others. So it is fair to ask whether or not true justice and the underpinning principles of justice are inherent in the process. We should recognize that justice is more than simple law. Justice is very concerned with morals and ethics. Government is a man-made entity that enforces the wishes and desires of the majority or the most influential in the society. Consequently, from a philosophical framework, government might not actually ensure justice, but rather the desires and wishes of the most powerful segment of the society. With this reality, throughout history, many governments and government structures have been plagued by scandals and embarrassing situations. And despite some attention to the concepts of ethics and morality, they sometimes fail. So government and government decision is not a perfect component for ensuring justice for all the actions and deeds within a society. This may prompt us to ask whether moral issues are an appropriate area for governmental intervention. Or more poignantly, should government intrude in our personal behavior when that behavior does not compromise the welfare of others? We know that under the harm principle, as proposed by noted English philosopher and political economist John Stuart Mill, persons should be free to do as they wish unless their actions would cause harm to others. So let's look at the intersection of personal choice and health, with cigarette smoking being one example. The International Bioethics Committee, the IBC of UNESCO, in its report in 2019 to the 195 member states around the world on the principle of individual responsibility for health, recommended that every individual, according to his or her own possibilities and values, should take care of their own health as a means to contribute to the well-being of society. The IBC further states that every individual should make judicious use of health care services and strive not to add an additional burden to services by incurring unnecessary health risks. In its dictates to countries and states, the IBC wants states not to develop or use punitive models of individual responsibility as a means to promote healthy lifestyles. It stated further that states should avoid paternalistic attitudes and acknowledge that individuals may make personal goals and have personal goals that are different and must be respected. So, why would the IBC make these recommendations? Well, in its report, it noted that if an individual has the capacity to be responsible, and if their actions are the cause of something, then he or she will have to answer for the consequences of their actions. However, the capacity to be responsible includes the notion of discernment, judgment, and the possibility of acting voluntarily. So, in order to establish individual responsibility, it is necessary to ensure that the person has freely performed the action. If we use the example of cigarette smoking, we should note that the highly addictive power of its content nicotine, and so the introduction of this highly addictive drug during teenage years has ensured that large numbers of people are unable to break free of its addictive effects as adults. The IBC says victim blaming should never be used when we seek to promote health. So that approach reinforces stigmatization, causes unnecessary mental stress, and demoralizes individuals into feeling despondent about their particular situation. They may harbor feelings of self-blame and sometimes shun seeking treatment for fear of social stigmatization. In a previous report on social responsibility and health in 2010, the IBC had noted that persons who had failed to act in a health promoting way could lack health literacy, have a lower level of education, or had no choice of a different lifestyle. And so society should not discriminate against them through denying them the much needed support to fight their disease or affliction. Lifestyle is just one element that interplays with several other factors, including socioeconomic, environmental, as well as genetic influences which contribute to the causes of ill health. So the IBC stated that health is both a public as well as private concern, and the responsibility of non-state actors such as NGOs and companies, in addition to the responsibility of individuals, is essential to the betterment of health for humanity. Dietary alcohol is the most widely consumed drug worldwide. From this, we know that high levels of mortality, morbidity, and social malaise are associated with the abuse of alcohol, and an increasing number of women and the youth are actually abusing alcohol. Yet strong epidemiological data have demonstrated a U or J-shaped relationship between the volume of alcohol consumed and all-cause mortality or disease burden. In fact, moderate alcohol consumption is associated with a lower risk of all-cause mortality and disease burden when compared with abstinence. Further, certain drinking patterns moderate overall alcohol volume consumption. Consequently, an emerging approach to the study of alcohol consumption among populations is to consider both the volume and pattern of consumption as they relate to mortality and disease burden. This has increased our current scientific understanding of both the benefits of moderate alcohol consumption and the detriments of immoderate consumption. And genetics and genomics have taught us that chronic alcoholism may run in families. Over 2,300 years ago, Aristotle articulated fitting goals for human life. His entire understanding of morality was built upon his conviction that a good life was devoted to the pursuit of good purposes. One of his most significant conclusions was that a good life is oriented to goods shared with others, the common good of the larger society of which a person is a part. So, the good life of a single person and the quality of the common life persons share with one another in society is linked. Therefore, the good of the individual and the common good are inseparable. Further, Aristotle opined that the common good of the community should always have primacy in setting directions for the lives of individuals, because it is a higher good that the particular goods, it is higher than the particular goods of private persons. To quote Aristotle, the attainment of the good for one person alone is, to be sure, a source of satisfaction. Yet, to secure it for a nation and for cities is nobler and more divine. We should also state that a public good can be described as a good that is present for all members of a community or society. This means that the enjoyment of this good by some people means that it should be able to be enjoyed by all. A beautiful sunset or the clean air of a healthy environment are examples of this. While public goods are extrinsic manifestations in the matter, however, the common good speaks to the relationship and the concern that should exist as the basic platform for the community and society. So given all that we have said, how far should the power of the state be used to write laws that seek to prevent behaviors that involve personal moral judgments? How would you answer that question? Let me point out that most of you will be using your own perceptions to answer this question. What you will be doing is to bring your own value system to bear on the question and hence the answer. You can therefore see in all these examples I have provided, cigarette smoking, alcohol consumption, abortion, and others such as prostitution, homosexuality, and so on, all contain a complex mixture of moral contemplation and determination, situational realities of the socioeconomic environment, genetic predisposition to addictive influences, and the matter of autonomy, people's personal choices and privacy. Do the choices made by individuals affect the goods available in society or our common enjoyment of public goods? If there are possibly multiple causative components to a person's action, whose performance a community or society does not like, is it just or fair to prohibit such actions through the blunt instrument of the law? And so, in summary, In my presentation this evening, I've sought to clarify the boundaries between your personal values and beliefs, private morality, public morality, ethics, and law. I have mentioned the matters of discernment, judgment, individual responsibility, and voluntariness. I have addressed the interplay of lifestyle, level of education, the environment, and the need to avoid victim blaming and stigmatization. I have underscored our need to fight disease and affliction, while being sensitive to the genetic components of many of the health challenges that persons grapple with. So while we must naturally be concerned about the public good, we should differentiate human behaviors that do not cause harm for other human persons when they are performed within the privacy of their own home. Legislation and regulating human behavior in order to minimize harm to other human beings or to prevent an infringement on their rights for a good and peaceful life should be the focus of our concerns. I hope my presentation this evening has caused you to think more deeply on these matters and will make you more informed when you take part in discussions on these various issues in the future. I thank you for your kind attention. Over to you, Professor Bailey.
Thank you, Derrick, for another excellent dissertation on a complex issue. I think the final point you made is a key point that we need to reflect on these things. That as human beings, we do have the inherent right to do what we think is in our best interest without the interference of the state. And the right to pursue pleasures which add value to our lives. And so I think the conclusion you arrived at is that legal moralism should not be imposed on others if they do not pose a threat to others. And you cited John Stuart Mill's principle, which I'm particularly sympathetic with. I actually went through the question and answer, and your presentation was so good that there are very few questions that have been raised. There's just one question I saw here, which I think is interesting, which asks, is the concept of the common good used for the approach of isolating individuals who are COVID positive? Was the same concept the foundation piece for presenting the argument that COVID vaccines should be mandatory? What are your thoughts?
Public health ethics has 8 major principles that guide decision making in the public health sphere. And so the public good is what you aim for. How you get there has to be built on certain platforms, these principles. And the simple answer, if I were to answer that person, is yes. Public health ethics is about preserving public health and seeking the common good. Because the principles, ethical principles that are used in public health balance issues related to the individual and their particular right against the right of the majority not to be harmed by the actions of the individual, then it is a balancing act. But in the long run, a decision has to be made. And so isolation and all of these restrictions on people's liberty are instituted for the common good. So The answer to that simply is yes.
Derrick, are you familiar with the concept of the tragedy of the commons, which
Repeat.
the tragedy of the commons, which is
Commons.
yes, which is a concept that sometimes the common man might get involved in activities or pursuits that will not do, which is inimical to the public good. And so their behavior will have to be controlled or legislated if their behavior will impact negatively on the wider society. Are you familiar with that concept?
Well, it's a flip side of Ms. Harm's principle. So there are many overlapping concepts that individual thinkers, philosophers put forward, but they all have a common theme. Well, certainly in Western societies, persons should be free to do as they wish as long as their actions do not cause harm to others. It is when they do something that will infringe on other people's rights to enjoy the public space without being harmed by them that you then restrict their liberty. So whilst I haven't heard that particular term, that concept used, I know the principles underlying it, which speaks to liberty and when do you restrict liberty, people's liberty. And as you said before, the harm principle aptly addresses that. And there are many other principles. Those of us that are involved in professional ethics will know about the Tarasov case, or the psychiatrists use a lot of that, where they're allowed to break confidentiality, for instance. If a patient tells them that said in confidence that they are mentally ill and they're going to kill somebody else or they're likely to cause harm, you're allowed to break confidentiality in that circumstance in order to preserve the common good, prevent them from doing harm to others. And so these are all the common areas in which these concepts work, but basically it comes down to I should be able to do as I wish within my own sphere. And when I go into public space, you should not intervene in my right to be in the public space unless my actions are going to cause harm to others.
Okay, Derrick, thanks very much. We're now approximately 12 minutes past 8. I noticed that a flurry of questions have been posted in the chat with respect to abortion, and I'm sure the debate will continue. Let me use the opportunity on behalf of the Agpj to thank you very much for an excellent presentations on matters that are fairly difficult and very complex, but requires deep thinking, and as you have said repeatedly, should be viewed contextually. Thank you very much, Derrick, and we hope to see you again on this platform in the very near future. Okay, the time has now come for us to invite Mr. Paul Dennis to make a presentation. He's senior medical representative. Over to you, Paul.
Good night. My name is Paul Dennis, medical representative with Medimpex Jamaica Limited. Tonight, I would like to share with you some of our products to remind you that we are very active in women's health care. Here is a little background. Medimpex is a subsidiary of two Hungarian companies, Aegis and Gideon Richter. Gideon Richter is best known in the field of women's health care. We offer products for contraception, fertility, vaginal infections, etc. Tonight, I want to highlight some of our products that we have in this region. We distribute two types of contraceptives, the emergency contraceptives and the oral contraceptives. For the emergency contraceptives, we have Postinor single dose and we have the Postinor 2. Or for the oral contraceptives, we are the distributors of Lindinet, Novinet, and Mistral. Let's take a look at our emergency contraceptive and get a better understanding of how the product works. Postinor is one of our flagship products. Postinor, as you know, is an ECP, emergency contraceptive pill. It acts to prevent ovulation. It is not an abortifacient, and it does not affect an implanted embryo or an established pregnancy. Very important to note. The administration of Postinor. Postinor tablet should be taken as soon as possible or within 72 hours of unprotected sex. The second tablet should be taken 12 hours after the first tablet. In the case of the single dose, we recommend taking it as soon as possible, 1 tablet. It is important also to note that the effectiveness of Postinor is decreased the longer you wait. The closer you get to the 72 hours, you get less effectiveness. So it's recommended to take it within the first 24 hours, actually. After administration, we find that some persons might have some side effects, but it's usually not a lot, usually 10% or less, right? Some persons might have bleeding disturbances, nausea, fatigue. Some might have dizziness, breast tenderness, and a breakthrough or withdrawal bleeding may occur 2 to 3 days after taking the tablet. With repeated administration, as I mentioned earlier, it should not be used more than once per menstrual cycle, because as I mentioned earlier, repeated use reduces the effectiveness of the drug. So it's not a regular OCP, it's just an emergency product. Just a little highlight, just to remind you that Postinor was developed again by Gideon Richter, and it has been in the market for over 40 years. And we are a brand, right? There are a lot of others on the market right now, but we are the brand, the innovator brand. How does Postinor work? Let's look at a short video clip.
The natural processes in the ovaries and the womb are controlled by hormones. Gonadotropin-releasing hormone is secreted from the hypothalamus in the brain and stimulates the production of luteinizing hormone and follicle-stimulating hormone by the pituitary gland in the brain. They control estrogen and progesterone production in the ovaries. Ovulation occurs once in a cycle when the egg cell leaves the ovary and gets into the fallopian tube. If sexual intercourse happens, the sperm cells of the man first reach the womb and then the fallopian tube. There they can meet the egg cell released after ovulation. And if one penetrates, fertilization can take place, which can result in pregnancy. But if it's not the right time to have a child yet, this can be avoided even after contraceptive failure or having unprotected sex. By taking either Escapel or Postinor morning after pill, you can avoid unplanned pregnancy. They contain levonorgestrel, a common hormone which also can be found in many oral contraceptives. Escapel and Postinor work the same way as regular contraceptive pills, but after sex, as they delay or inhibit ovulation by delaying or inhibiting the elevation of the luteinizing hormone levels, this so-called LH surge. The egg cell does not leave the ovary, so there is no ovulation. That is why fertilization cannot occur. This way, they prevent pregnancy before it is established. Inside the fallopian tube, sperm cells will survive for some days waiting for the egg cell, but they cannot meet each other. This is the reason why emergency contraceptive pill is not equal to abortion. On the contrary, Escapel and Postinor can help to avoid abortion or unplanned pregnancy if taken as soon as possible after contraception failure or having unprotected sex.
The cost of Postinor 2 is approximately $990 from Medimpex. The Postinor single dose is list 4 and requires a prescription. The cost from Medimpex is $1,090. Now let's take a look at our oral contraceptives. As mentioned earlier, we have 3 currently in the market: Lindinet, Novinet, and Mistral. Lindinet and Novinet are both considered low-dose contraceptives due to the low levels of ethinyl estradiol. They both contain 20 microgram of ethinyl estradiol, and the Mistral contains a little higher. It's 30 micrograms of ethinyl estradiol. So we have 2 low dose and 1 regular dose of contraceptive on offer. Lindinet, our first product up, it's considered 99% effective. The progesterone, gestodine, it takes a longer time to be cleared from the system, so it has a more sustained drug effect, so less chance of getting pregnant due to misspill. It should be noted that the gestodine has very low incidence of side effects, so much so that we have a butterfly here on the box, and we like to consider this product gentle as a butterfly. If you use your artist's eyes, you will see a butterfly on the box. Right, so we like to recommend this product to the more mature ladies who do not want any side effect, no weight gain, no breast tenderness, anything like that. So we target the more mature population for Lindinet. Novinet is our other low-dose contraceptive. It has very positive effect on mild acne. Therefore, we target the younger ladies who will sometimes present with acne, seborrhea, right? And it has positive effect on Dismen, so less painful Dismen. And the changes in body weight is minimal due to the low levels of estrogen. Here we have our product Mistral. Mistral has very significant anti-androgenic properties. So it's mild, it deals with mild to moderate acne, hair, and skin greasiness. This is so significant that it's next in line to cyproterone. And you know, cyproterone is the gold standard when it comes to acne treatment. However, it has very good contraceptive properties, good cycle control, and decreased duration of menstruation. As I mentioned earlier, Gideon Richter also supplies products for vaginal infection. One of our flagship products as well is our CleanD. It's been around for a long time. It contains your metronidazole and miconazole, both 100 milligram strength. So CleanD 100. It contains 10 vaginal tablets. The indication is usually for vaginal treatment of urogenital trichomonal infections, bacterial vaginosis, yeast infections. CleanD ideally should be moistened before insertion, and it should be inserted high in the vagina. Also, one point to note is that it can be used for 5 nights because sometimes the 10 nights might be too long for a particular patient or husband. So we recommend 2 tablets per night for 5 nights. Here we have another product, Mycosis. This is our fluconazole. It's available in 150 milligrams and 200 milligram strengths. Fluconazole ideally has been used for vaginal infections for years. Now we have expanded its use. We are now recommending it to use to treat liver spot, jock itch, ringworm, manus, pedis, oropharyngeal candidiasis. On our visits with you, you'll see us come with these flyers, giving you an idea of the indication and the duration of this treatment. Normally call it the comfort therapy. Here we have the fluconazole being used to treat liver spot, jock itch, as I mentioned earlier. Now, as you can see, the indication is there, the dosage is there, and the duration of treatment. One point to note is that in the case of onychomycosis, the treatment is 150 milligram per week until the nail grows out. Here we have our Sharifa, which is our iron supplement. It's a slow release iron formulation that doesn't cause GI upset. It also has vitamin C in it to enhance the absorption. And it gives 100 milligram of elemental iron. I must mention that it's very affordable as well. Sharifa is indicated in iron deficiency and in anemia. The dosage is for adults is usually 1 tablet 2 times daily. And it can be dosed once a day if anemia is mild. In pregnancy, during the first 6 months, a single tablet once daily is taken, and in the last trimester, 1 tablet 2 times daily is recommended. Why use Sharifa? Sharifa is excellent because it doesn't cause much GI upset, doesn't cause the constipation that usually occurs with iron, and it has faster absorption. Not to mention, smaller size, odorless, and it's very affordable. We have a new line of over-the-counter supplements from a company called Prime Health, where we have supplements ranging from men's health, women's health, children, for the bones, so forth. So today I'd like to focus on our prenatal vitamins and mineral supplement available in most pharmacies. It's recommended 1 tablet per day or as directed by a healthcare practitioner. The other product that we have is iron complex for women. Its recommended use is 1 capsule per day or as directed by your healthcare practitioner. Before I end, I must do some public service announcement. We have moved from Ripon Road. Now we are on Balmoral Avenue, 21 Balmoral Avenue. You will see the sign, the Medimpex sign, and you will see an electronic billboard to let you know that you have arrived. Thank you very much for your attention. Please feel free to ask any questions in the chat. Thank you very much.
Okay. Mr. Dennis, thanks much for comprehensive overview of the products which your company offers. And we now will move into the final presentation for the evening, which is a sponsor's presentation. And the presenter is Dr. Sharifa Fredericks. Dr. Frederick is a consultant obstetrician and gynecologist at Dewey, and she is presently a trained fertility and minimally invasive specialty at the institution. She received her MBBS in 2001 with honors in Obs and Gyne and earned her DM in Obs and Gyne in 2008. She then went on to complete a fellowship in assisted reproduction and minimally invasive surgery. She has a special interest in uterine sparing surgery for young women with uterine fibroids and has published several papers in this specialization. She comes to us this evening, therefore, eminently qualified to give us an update on contraception, a fertility specialist perspective. Thanks very much for joining us, Dr. Fredericks, and now over to you.
Good night, everyone, fellow panelists. Good night, participants. I'd like to say a special thank you to Medimpex and Agpj for allowing me to share my perspectives as a fertility specialist on contraceptives. Just a slight overview of, the objectives. I will do an overview of how contraceptives work, the failure of contraceptives, why they fail, the adverse effects of contraceptives on fertility, what fertility is like after contraception use, contraceptives, how they affect fertility tests, and some of the non-contraceptive benefits regarding enhancing fertility of contraceptives and fertility after sterility. Just to start, I will speak about fecundity a lot, and I'd like to define it as a probability of achieving a pregnancy within one's menstrual cycle. And the fecundity is usually about only 20 to 25%. So there's only a 20 to 25% chance of a woman getting pregnant in one menstrual cycle. And this is very low. This happens because for a gamete, for the male and the female gametes to meet and interact is a very intricate and meticulous process, which often doesn't take place within one menstrual cycle. The oocyte only lives for 24 hours and the sperm only lives for 3 to 4 days. So getting pregnant is not an easy task. However, contraceptives become necessary in order to prevent unintended and untimed pregnancies. So very briefly, how do contraceptives work? So hormonal contraceptives, which contain progesterone, they act in two ways. They inhibit the menstrual cycle release of luteinizing hormone, which in effect will inhibit ovulation, even if follicular genesis occurs. Hormonal contraceptives that contain progestin only also have the effect of thickening the cervical mucus and making the cervix impenetrable to sperm. Combined oral contraceptives have the additional effect of estrogen, and estrogen inhibits follicular stimulating hormone release from the pituitary gland, making follicular development impossible. So the combined contraceptives have the effect of both estrogen as well as progesterone. There are other forms of contraceptives like the intrauterine device, which is placed in the uterine cavity, and it releases copper as well as copper salts, which incapacitates sperm. So it makes it impossible for sperm to reach the egg. Other forms of contraception include the lactational amenorrhea. And what happens here is that beta endorphins release inhibit gonadotropin releasing hormone, which inhibit follicular stimulating hormone as well as luteinizing hormone. And hence you get an anovulatory state as well as amenorrhea. This is very effective in the first 6 months of sole breastfeeding with no supplementation. And so even in that first 6 months, if the menses resumes, these cycles are usually anovulatory and provide good contraception. Finally, the female sterilization, which is basically occluding the fallopian tube. This is commonly done by the Pomeroy method, which is common at the time of C-section. And it has when it's done at the time of C-section, because of the edema of the fallopian tubes, as well as a rich blood supply, this can fail. This form of contraception, or this form of sterilization, is the most common form that will fail because of the additive effects of the pregnancy. The better form of female sterilization is via laparoscopy and actually occluding the tube at the isthmic portion, which is about 2.5 centimeters from the origin of the fallopian tube. And it also has the effect of it is most amendable to reversal if regret occurs. For female sterilization, some institutions actually do what is called a salpingectomy. And we have to be very careful with this, because this should only be done in a selective population of patients, and they should be properly informed before we go ahead and do a total salpingectomy. Because patients often believe that we're tying the tube, we're not totally removing it or totally damaging the tube. So we have to be very careful with that. Another form of sterilization is a male sterilization, which is a vasectomy. And this is not, the uptake of male sterilization is very uncommon in Jamaica. Men don't like to talk about it, far less present to have it done. But it is very safe, it is highly effective. It is done via non-scalpel technique, where there's only a small opening is made in the scrotal sac, where the vas deferens is pulled up, and you have bilateral occlusion of the vas deferens. And usually there's no suture or anything that's required, and they usually recover very quickly. With this form of sterilization, we usually look after 12 weeks to make sure that there's an absence of sperm. So we do what is called a semen analysis, although the uptake of coming back to actually do the semen analysis after sterilization is only about 42%. Okay. And of course, we have the other forms of contraceptives, including the barrier methods, the male and the female condom, which is highly user dependent and not extremely effective. Now, why do contraceptives, or why is there a contraception failure? One, it may occur because of the high fecundity of the couple, meaning that you have what is called sometimes super fertile females and super fertile males. And so there is a likelihood of contraceptive failure if you have such a couple. There's also the reduced efficacy of the method. So you have methods which are highly user dependent, and so they tend to, be associated with a high failure rate. If the knowledge of the contraceptive method, if the person doesn't understand how the contraceptive works, then there also can be contraceptive failure because of lack of knowledge. And this is why we have to make sure that we are accessible to informing patients, and we ourselves know about, how the contraceptive works and why it fails. Sometimes contraceptives fail because of inconsistent use. Inconsistent use occurs when the patient is fearful of the side effects or is experiencing extreme side effects, or doesn't understand how the contraceptive works as well. And it also occurs because some patients feel as if the contraceptive may affect their fertility in the future, and hence they don't use it regularly. Now, contraceptive failure is actually higher in women in their below the age of 30, because one, they have a higher fecundity in their 20s. They may have more frequency of coitus, as well as older women tend to be more experienced with contraceptives, and so they're more knowledgeable experience, and so they use it in a better way. A little bit about contraceptives and their failures. As we can see, the intrauterine, the implants, as well as the hormonal IUDs, as well as the male sterilization, have the highest efficacy or the lowest failure rates. And the failure rates are similar in terms of the typical and the perfect use. This is because it's usually a physician that it's not user dependent, and so the failure rates are fairly low. Female sterilization is a little bit, the failure rate is a little bit higher because one, as I mentioned before, if you tie someone's tube at the time of pregnancy, then you can have recanalization of the fallopian tubes. What should be done as well is that especially in the Pomeroy method, the specimen should be sent for histopathological evaluation to make sure that it is actually a tube that is taken out bilaterally, as well as to, of course, make sure that there's no cancer in the tube. With tubal surgery, sometimes the person may ligate the round ligament accidentally, thinking it's a tube. And so therefore, that's why sometimes the failure rate is a little bit higher. The copper IUCD, the failure rate is a little bit higher as well compared with the hormonal IUDs. And as you can see, the failure rates tend to increase as we go down the list because these contraceptive methods, injectables, require user motivation. And so you can see this, the gap now in terms of typical and perfect use, as well as the failure rates increasing. When we look at the fertility awareness-based methods, we can see that this is not an acceptable means of contraception because your fertility varies with each cycle depending on different lifestyle changes, etc. Now, historically, there are certain myths that are associated with contraceptives and its effect on fertility. There are many people out there that believe that, if they when they come off a contraceptive method and they cannot get pregnant, it must be the contraceptive that has caused their infertility. Back in the 1970s, older studies show strong evidence of impaired fertility in women who discontinued oral contraceptives compared with other methods. But the magnitude of the impairment was negligible after 42 months. Now, these are only really associated with a higher dose contraceptive, combined oral contraceptives that were used in the past, the 50 microgram. And since the 1990s, we are now using the low dose methods. And so this long lasting effect on inability to get pregnant is no longer seen. Now, historically, there's also the myth that the IUCD is associated with PID as well as tubal infertility. But studies which have been done shows that the risk is only highest after the process of inserting the device. And they only found a significant association with PID when a chlamydia infection was found. And hence, this may lead us to think that, at the time of an IUCD insertion, it is probably prudent to test for chlamydia infection or just to treat at the time of an IUCD insertion. In terms of lost implants, such as the Jadel, which are subdermal implants, sometimes they are not inserted properly and they're inserted way into the muscle, and so it cannot be found. However, their contraceptive effect will only continue up to about 1 year after expiration. And so the patient can be assured that her fertility will return at least 1 year after the expiration of this device. Now, 15% of women who discontinue their contraceptives fail to conceive within 1 year. Why does this happen? Delayed return of fertility and infertility are commonly linked to the previous contraceptive used. This means that when a patient discontinues her contraceptive and she cannot get pregnant for the whole year, she's left to believe it is associated with the contraceptive that she was on, when in fact, more than likely, it is due to an underlying condition. She probably had menstrual irregularities before. Maybe she had PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, before. Also age. A patient may have started a contraceptive. She may have had a child, so she's proven fertility, started a contraceptive, but she stops it 10 years later. So it could be now age that is having an effect on her ovarian reserve rather than the contraceptive agent that was used. Lifestyle of the couple is also important to consider. Prevention of sexually transmitted infections, which can be associated with, endometritis as well as tubal problems after the contraceptive has been discontinued. When we looked at a meta-analysis of women who discontinued their contraception for the sake of pregnancy, we see that the 12-month pregnancy rates when we looked at 4 different contraceptives, we saw that the oral contraceptive was actually the highest in return to fertility after 12 months. The effects of the contraceptive was amplified, especially older women. So we're thinking that more than likely it's an ovarian reserve issue, obese women, and women with menstrual disturbances, meaning that it's usually not the contraceptive that caused delay in fertility, but a condition that exists before. Now, how do contraceptives affect fertility tests? So there is a form of ovarian reserve, a biomarker, which is called the serum anti-Müllerian hormone, which is becoming more and more popular to estimate how much reserve a woman has in terms of her ovaries. This form of testing, well, a lot of studies have been done on anti-Müllerian hormone as it relates to fertility. We even have a local study which is going on at the university hospital, where we're looking at the AMH levels of random persons and looking at, the low AMH level maybe suggest a shortened reproductive window. Hormonal contraceptives may lower the AMH without it being a true reflection of ovarian reserve. And more we're left to believe that, when patients come for contraception, they should also be, spoken to about fertility later on in life. And what could possibly be done is an AMH level of all women who are embarking on contraceptives to see and to be able to counsel them. So even in our study that we are doing at UE, we have found that, we have women in their 20s who come in, just to participate in the study. And we have revealed that they have a very low AMH level, which means that if they're in their 20s now and the AMH level is low, in the next 10 years, they probably will suffer from infertility. So this is a good opportunistic way of finding out if women, or finding out which women have the risk of ovarian insufficiency later on in life, and capitalizing on it, either by advising them not to go on the contraceptive to try and get pregnant if the circumstances are favorable, or to preserve their eggs at that time, because later down in life they may suffer from ovarian insufficiency. Now, hormonal contraceptives may lower the AMH, as I said before, and persons who use hormonal contraceptives have about a 25.2 lower mean anti-Müllerian hormone level than non-users of contraceptives. The anti-Müllerian hormone is secreted by the granulosa cells of the follicles, of the larger follicles. So if a person is given a hormonal contraceptive and their FSH level is low, then the antral follicle is not going to grow to that size where you have an abundance of granulosa cells excreting the anti-Müllerian hormone level. So this is how hormonal contraceptives lower the AMH level. This has practical implication and helps interpret results without the risk of getting pregnant, which means that you may have a patient who is on a contraceptive and you want to know, what her AMH level is without taking her off the contraceptive, but you are now able to advise her that there's a 25% fall because she's on the hormonal contraceptive. This also affects programs which screen potential anonymous egg donors, reflecting on otherwise excellent donors if the AMH level is low, meaning that patients who are coming in for egg donation, you may want to take them off the oral contraceptive because they may not satisfy the criteria to be an egg donor while on the contraceptive. So you may have to put them on an IUCD or something else so that they're not disqualified from donating eggs because of that 25% fall in their AMH level as a result of being on a combined oral contraceptive or any hormonal contraceptive. Now, what are the benefits of contraceptive agents regarding fertility? Studies have found that oral contraceptive use for 5 years and over may actually be protective. Now, the protective effect of oral contraceptives act by minimizing the endometrial proliferation and menstrual shedding, therefore preventing damaging progression if a patient has endometriosis. It has also found to prevent endometrial dysfunction that might develop with prolonged cyclical proliferation. There is also strong evidence that women who lack endometrial development due to estrogen deficiency, which is provided by the oral contraceptive as a result of ovarian failure, are subsequently more receptive to implantation of oocytes than actual menstruating women. Ford and McCormack have also suggested that oral contraceptives protect against age-related miscarriages, mainly due to trisomy, by the suppression of ovulation and therefore preservation of the number of follicles. Oral contraceptives have also been used in vitro fertilization cycles, one, to prevent persons from developing ovarian cysts, and also to facilitate the appropriate timing of treatment without having any deleterious effects on the pregnancy rates. Now, fertility after sterility. Now, as I mentioned before, it is very prudent that we counsel our patients who are presenting for sterility in the form of tubal ligation or vasectomy. There was a CREST study which showed that 12.7% of all women experience regret after tubal ligation, and this was as high as 20.3 if the tubal ligation was performed under the age of 30. So this is something that we commonly have to deal with as fertility specialists. Women present who have, thought they had completed their family, but they may have ended a relationship, started a new relationship, and now, they have regret and they want to get pregnant. What do we offer these patients? They can be offered a tubal reversal, and tubal reversal, the success rate depends on the age of the person. If the patient is less than 30, of course, the success rate is greater, and also the segment of residual tube that is left. So the tube, if the residual portion of the tube is greater than 4 inches, that is associated with a greater success than if more of the tube was removed. We also have patients who have had a previous vasectomy who come back wanting to get pregnant. Now, do we offer them a vasectomy reversal, or do we offer them another alternative? Vasectomy reversal is very uncommon. Well, vasectomies are uncommon in Jamaica, as well as vasectomy reversals are even more uncommon in Jamaica. Most of the literature which I've found speaks to the United States and Europe, where they report very good success, patency success rates as it relates to a vasectomy reversal. And of course, when you look at the pregnancy success rates, this is not very accurate because it depends on the female fertility and other factors. So do we do surgery to reverse a tubal ligation or a vasectomy, or do we just offer the person IVF? That's a very difficult question. IVF is in vitro fertilization. It's a very tough question because it should be always dealt with on an individual basis. Surgery has its benefits in that there's only one procedure that's necessary, especially if you want to have multiple children. It's less expensive than IVF, but IVF has its benefits in that it's a quicker time to get pregnant when you do an IVF cycle, especially if all the other factors are favorable. So that is the fertility after sterilization. All right, so the take-home message here as it relates to contraception and fertility are, when you look at patients who are going on a contraceptive, you have to be able to counsel them appropriately. How long do you plan to be on this contraceptive? Remember that, you know, after a certain amount of time, you are now aged, and so your ovarian reserve may be very limited. You may take this opportunity to do an anti-Müllerian hormone level so that you can properly advise them as to whether it's a good idea to go on a contraceptive and for how long they should. You also need to evaluate the patient for menstrual disorders and also counsel them as to, you know, lifestyle factors which may contribute to infertility after they have discontinued the contraceptive methods. Fertility testing, should it be routine? I do believe so. I believe that all women who present to, you know, their general practitioner should have their anti-Müllerian hormone levels done, especially if they plan to have children in the future. With insertion of an IUCD, chlamydia testing or appropriate chlamydia treatment should be improvised. With regard to sterility, even though it's supposed to be a permanent method of contraception, proper counseling is important. We have to evaluate the patient's age. We have to be able to, we can offer them an alternative approach, a long-acting reversible contraception method, if, you know, they may have some doubt in the future. And we should always do a conservative as possible surgical approach with these patients. And as I said before, the laparoscopic method of just using a Felshi clip or a fallope ring on the isthmic portion and just destroying a small portion of the fallopian tube is always the best method, especially in the patient who is younger than 30. And that concludes my presentation.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Fredericks. With respect to contraception, a number of questions have been posted in the question and answer section, but I just wanted to ask you to comment on emergency contraception. Are there other options that one might consider if when a patient has had unplanned sexual encounter and fear that they could get pregnant apart from the tablets? Are there any other options that one could consider?
Okay, well, definitely so. It's prudent to take a history to find out exactly, you know, when the last period was, and to be able to counsel as to what is her chance of getting pregnant. Has ovulation already taken place? Other methods apart from the, you know, the emergency contraceptive pills include the IUCD insertion that can be used as well for emergency contraception.
Would you consider menstrual aspiration as another technique?
A menstrual aspiration, well, as I said before, it also depends on the stage of the cycle. That would not be my go-to agent, but it can be considered. Because if you do a menstrual aspiration, you'll be therefore disrupting the lining and making endometrial receptivity very low.
Thank you. I noticed in your list, I don't know if I missed it, but did you mention female condoms, or is that no longer recommended?
Yes, it was there. It was there alongside male condom use. But of course, the failure rates are fairly high. It has its advantages of preventing sexually transmitted infections. But because it's so user dependent, you use it at the time of coitus, it has a fairly high failure rate, especially in the younger population.
Again, I can't recall, but did you mention withdrawal as a possible method of birth control?
Well, withdrawal, I believe, was on this slide as well. Yes, that is a possible method of birth control.
Is it effective?
No, it is not. It's not effective method because the when somebody recognizes that they are going to have an ejaculation, they can actually have an ejection of sperm before they actually realize. And the quantity of semen in this portion of sperm is actually the highest. So if we were to do a semen analysis of just that first part of the ejaculate, we would find a very high sperm count. And so that's why this method is not really effective.
Thank you. Another question, which I'd love for you to clarify. You kept mentioning fecundity as a possible cause for failed contraception. Why?
Well, as I mentioned before, if you have a very high fecundity, meaning that you are a person who you will conceive, your rate of conception per menstrual cycle is extremely high, this can add to the failure rate of any method, well, especially methods such as the hormonal contraceptive methods.
Okay. Another question, which is quite interesting. Does the OCP delay the onset of menses?
No, the lower dose contraceptive pills are not associated with post-pill amenorrhea or delayed menses. If a person suffers from amenorrhea after taking a pill, she needs to be checked out because this is probably due to an underlying disorder. Maybe she had a previous menstrual abnormality, maybe she's obese, I would have to investigate the patient for an underlying disorder and not just assume that it's the pill. When we used to use a higher dose, the 50 microgram pill, this used to occur.
Another question. When do you stop giving or using OCPs? Is there a timeline where you should stop, or can it continue throughout the woman's reproductive cycle?
Very good question. It can be actually used up until menopause. Once a person is not at risk of cardiovascular disease, she doesn't smoke, she can use oral contraceptive pills, or she doesn't have any underlying coagulopathies, oral contraceptive pills can actually be advocated for use because they have non-contraceptive benefits, protective against ovarian cancer, endometrial cancers, colon cancer. And so, it has a lot of benefits and can be used up until menopause.
In that case, then, why don't we use the OCP to delay menopause, to increase a woman's quality of life?
To delay menopause?
Let's continue until 60.
Well, the pill is not really delaying menopause because the withdrawal bleed you get is because of the pill. So it's not actually delaying menopause. You are actually using it now for its non-contraceptive benefits. So the additive effect of the estrogen, reducing the side effects of menopause. That's why you would continue the pill beyond it.
Another question. A number of patients have problems with breakthrough bleeding with Depot. What's the current treatment for dealing with breakthrough bleeding with Depo-Provera?
With which one? Depo-Provera?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, you can give them add contraceptives such as the oral contraceptive pill. You can put them on progestin oral medications such as Norcolot or Provera. However, if you have to continuously add another form of hormone to the Depo-Provera, it's probably not the best form of contraceptive for that patient. So I usually use the first 6 months, trying to prevent spotting, etc. But if the patient continues to bleed, then I would advise the patient that it's not the best method for her.
Thank you. Final question, implants. Could you remind us of the different type of implants that are available?
Okay, so we have the implants such as in the past you used to have the 6-rod implants. No, we have the Jadel, which is the 2-rod implants, subdermal implants, and there's actually the Implanon, which is not available yet in Jamaica. So these are the different types of subdermal implants that can be used, which contain progestins.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, Dr. Fredericks, we really appreciate you taking time out to give us an update on contraception and the fertility specialist perspective. We look forward to sharing this venue and podium with you in the near future. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, colleagues, we're doing very well. It's now 5 minutes after 9, and the only task left for me then is to thank you all for joining us this evening. At one point in time, we had over 850 participants in this seminar. It indicates that the topic was sufficiently interesting and provocative to encourage such a large number of colleagues to come out and take time out to listen and reflect on the topics we have presented. Let me use this opportunity to thank the APJA for conceiving of this ethics seminar, and particularly the very provocative and stimulating issues that were discussed. It has been a pleasure for me to chair this seminar, and it therefore leaves me only to do one thing, which is to thank you for listening and for cooperating and for sending in your questions. And therefore, I'm going to take my leave now, and it leaves me just for one final task, which is to ask Ms. Paulette Bedford, medical representative, to offer the vote of thanks. Have yourself a wonderful evening.
Good evening, everyone. I am just waiting for the camera so I've been hiding behind the computer all evening, so I'm just waiting for you to see my face. All right, there we go. All right. It gives me immense pleasure to deliver the vote of thanks for this webinar. As Coffee says, gratitude is a must. So let's just give thanks to where it's due. This event would not be possible without the collaborative efforts of a network of people. So first on my list, I would want to thank the presenters, Dr. Derrick, who is now residing in Canada. We discuss your business, Doc, for discussing the multi-faceted issues in abortion, along with the legal prohibition, cigarette smoking, alcohol consumption, abortion, public good, or legislating morality. And to Dr. Sharifa Frederick, talking about your business again, who is on vacation and also off the island. But thank you, Dr. Frederick, for taking the time out to presenting and for just informing, giving us your perspective from a fertility specialist. Thank you both for the enlightening and interesting discussion on these very sensitive topics. To the team at AGP, Dr. Donald Gordon, the association president, to our moderator, Dr. Elverston Bailey, and I cannot leave out Ms. Lynn Thompson, Mrs. Lynn Thompson Hyatt, the secretariat at the AGP. I know Warren already big her up, but I reiterate all Warren's sentiments. And Lynn, we cannot thank you enough. Also, Mr. Samuel Heron of Oldgate Solutions for providing this technical platform on which we are able to gather. Thank you for your continued IT support. And finally, a big thank you to all the attendees who logged in from home. Thank you for having spent the few hours with us. The Medimpex family and the AGP, thank you. Have a wonderful evening. Goodbye. Bye.
Correction. Just one correction. I'm not in Canada. I'm actually notarious right now as we speak.
Talking about your business.
Welcome home. Welcome home.